the full title is The Net, the Unabomber, LSD, and the Internet.
Right.
So right away, you could see that that's quite a triad of subjects right there. And I'm sure we've mentioned the Unabomber before, Ted Kaczynski. And, you know, he's like a huge pop culture figure, I guess.
Yeah.
Love him or hate him.
He's he's kind of a Che Guevara of the modern age.
In a lot of ways he is. In a lot of ways he is. But, you know, I mean, I'm old enough to actually like remember the Unabomber like being a thing in the 90s. I don't know if you remember any of it.
I don't think so. Yeah, like I mean, I am old enough that like I was alive when the Unabomber was doing his shit, but I don't really have like consciousness of it, or I didn't have consciousness of it at the time.
Yeah, maybe it's because there were bombings in Berkeley and in Sacramento and like San Francisco.
Much more. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that classic hotbed of radical terroristic violence, the San Francisco Bay Area, and also like you said, like his kind of political leanings and what he came to represent for like say radical environmentalists. You know, it's something that I guess people were paying a lot of attention to, but I just remember it in kind of a like an O.J. Simpson spectacle kind of way, that it was one of these things that happened that caused an absolute media circus in the mid 90s, like that, and like the Oklahoma City bombing was another one, and then of course later like the Monica Lewinsky shit. And the 90s was just full of these like very mediated like legal spectacles, you know, and like criminal trials and stuff like that. And so, you know, I mean, like that the sketch of the Unabomber, you know, the class with like the big sunglasses and everything, like that. It's like that was etched into my consciousness, like as a child, of just like this scary man who mails bombs to people. Like he's and he's like a genius, like, and nobody knows where he is, and he's evaded the FBI for 17 years and stuff. But then they catch him, and he was like this like mountain man. And, you know, I mean, then there was like a million true crime, like cable TV sort of documentary things about like getting into the mind of the Unabomber and all kinds of stuff. Even up to this day, I think there was just a new like dramatized movie that came out about Ted Kaczynski, which I didn't get to watch before we did this. But,
I think I remember seeing that, like catching the Unabomber or something, right? Something like that, like the 48 hours of the Unabomber. I don't know, something. It really,
like that, and it's all about like it's like chasing a mastermind. Like, it's like you have all the trappings
a
of
maniac. I mean, he was like a maniac, but like, you know, they weigh on a little bit thick.
They definitely do, and all these like
stand to be a little bit more like
experts.
Self-reflexivity about the situation.
Like they just love that he played the game in that sense of like, ooh, he left his signature on all of his bombs and like all these clues, and he uses cryptograms. Like he's like the Zodiac and like the Son of Sam killer and like a political terrorist all rolled into one.
Yeah, and I mean he also like targeted the people who like media types could relate to most immediately, like, or even like who they idolized, you know, like, so it was. You know, I mean, it's kind of like the whole situation of, oh, they have blue eyes. Like, how could this happen? Like, you know, they're white, they're Christian. Is like, oh my God, like they're tech people. Like,
esteemed serious scientists.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally serious scientists is who he was targeting. And, you know, airline executives and, like, you know, the president of like the California Forestry Association, you know, like the timber lobbyists and things like that. Of course, that's the type. It's kind of like how, you know, Nicole Brown Simpson gets slaughtered in Brentwood, and that type of thing just doesn't happen in Brentwood, you know. So it's so titillating, and people just glommed onto it on that level. And of course, like a big component of it was like the thing most people know that led to him getting caught. Was he demanded that he offered like a deal to the New York Times, I think of the Washington Post, that if they would publish his manifesto, he would stop bombing people. And they did. And so like his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, was published in the New York Times in 1995. And you know, it's usually the dominant narrative is that I think from like the academic establishment, from the journalistic establishment, and for most like political, writers has been that it's like it's badly written, it's full of cliches, it's stupid, it's rambling, it's bitter, yada yada yada. And I mean, it's really a lot of things. But then, some people have emphasized over the years that, well, there are some like valid concepts or ideas. Like, it's not totally unhinged.
Yeah, I think everyone recognized that at the time. Like, yeah, I mean, a lot of those things are true. Like, it is full of cliches. It's not like, the Unabomber was like an accomplished academic. He was like an intelligent person, and he is an intelligent person. Like, obviously, he's very erudite, but I don't know if he would have had the success like just writing things like Industrial Society and Its Future, but like it's not like super groundbreaking. A lot of it is like kind of like intuitive and also parts of it are like hackneyed or like just like dumb political nomoi. But I think that people recognize that it was like it was a critique that did have some resonance for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people feel that the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race, like on some level. So I think that
it's not as fringe of a belief in and of itself. The decision to start bombing people, like targeting people for assassination, a little more fringy. But
definitely. People generally aren't down with murder, but and I mean, there's also like a certain romance to the narrative that he was living out in the mountains and then, these machines came in and they were cutting down trees and destroying his trails. And he was like, there's no escape. Like, I must strike back, so he's kind of like, he has the qualities of like a folk hero in that respect, so
that's one way he's been presented. But
yes, exactly. Or he lends himself to that kind of,
Yeah. But I wasn't as familiar with kind of maybe some other aspects of the Ted Kaczynski story until I watched this documentary, The Net. And I think it's on YouTube with like an English translation. So anybody can go watch it. I'd highly recommend it. It's really fascinating. It's kind of like, I would describe it as like an Adam Curtis documentary that doesn't hold back or fall into like weird British solipsisms.
It benefits from the German like outsider perspective, I think. It's kind of just like very nonplussed at a lot of like American things.
Rightfully so, I would say. And it was the first time I encountered the information, which is out there. This is totally confirmed. This isn't really speculation anymore, and more people have talked about it in like more recent years, but like the origins of Ted Kaczynski's hatred of technology and the scientific elite, and perhaps maybe that had something to do with a 3-year psychological study that he participated in at Harvard that basically was kind of under the broader umbrella of like the MK-Ultra program and subjected young Ted, who went to Harvard, I think, at the age of 16. He was kind of a prodigy. Subjected him to highly abusive interrogations, and psychological breakdown techniques, led by the project's head honcho, Dr. Henry A. Murray, who we're going to get into in this episode. But I knew he was a sus lord, but some of the things like we dug up in some of the books are really kind of staggering, even by like deranged MK-Ultra scientists in the 50s standards. And, it seems immediately like there's a real synchronicity between these two things of like Ted Kaczynski's spiral over the years when he became a mathematics professor at UC Berkeley and then withdrew to Montana to like build himself a cabin and withdraw from society. Like a lot of his original trauma or wound was sort of created by these elite Harvard scientists who were like fucking with him in this like highly unethical experiment.
Yeah. I mean, going to like Harvard probably can fuck you up, like, period. But yeah, this was especially deranged. I think we'll talk about like the actual like nature of the experiment and like what it entailed. But it was kind of like a sort of condensed like a lot of the traumas that like being a gifted child or like going to like an elite university where you need to like rise to the top, like sink or swim. where I think it kind of compressed a lot of that already, that experience that can already be traumatic for people of certain personalities, for many people.
Definitely. One of the books that we're going to talk about probably more later, but is a pretty good resource, is Harvard and the Unabomber by Alston Chase from 2003. And he himself, given that name, you might not be surprised, he is a Harvard man as well.
Right.
And he talked about kind of the feelings of alienation, what he called the culture of despair at Harvard in the 1950s and early 1960s, and how in some ways this was maybe sometimes an intentional and other times an unintentional effect or result of the curriculum and the way it was structured in those days. And like the particular kind of changing cultural climate within Harvard and like their post-war anxieties and all this other stuff. But he makes a pretty good argument in that book that, yes, like Ted Kaczynski kind of kept to himself and was like a bit of a weirdo and maybe didn't have like a ton of friends, but that it wasn't exactly abnormal for Harvard at that time, especially for somebody studying mathematics, who like they're always like known as like unkempt, kind of antisocial, like always in their head, not interested in women, that kind of thing. So that book goes a good way to kind of like shoot down what almost every like true crime thing about the Unabomber argues, which is that like he was always messed up and mentally ill. And it just like, and maybe the Harvard experiments made it worse or triggered something, but he always had like paranoid schizophrenia lurking in him, or
I mean, but I also like, honestly, like, I question whether, I think it's worth questioning, like, is the Unabomber mentally ill? Like, do you have to be mentally ill? I mean, like, it makes you a bad person to like kill wantonly, innocent people who like are, he killed people who like really, were not even by his logic, like culpable for, anything that would warrant killing them. But is doing bad things like that, does that make you mentally ill? Or was it like, does that mean that he's crazy? Like,
well, that's a really interesting question.
Is it possible to be like a bad person or to do something that is, I guess, maybe there's something missing, some like empathy that's not present. But I also feel like in a way, like, there is a rationale behind it, even if it's one that we might not like agree with, I don't know. Like, I just feel like at a certain point, you almost have to say like everyone who commits a crime is like mentally ill or something. But I don't know. Like, is that, I don't know if he was like so paranoid schizophrenic,
It's a very nebulous term, right? I mean, he was right to be paranoid, obviously, because he had captured a glimpse of the way that some of the most esteemed scientists in the country are operating, and kind of like he was smart enough and perceptive enough to kind of recognize maybe the deeper, more sinister implications of these like techniques and technologies that were being developed. I mean, unlike some people that were hanging around Cambridge in the early 1960s who were very serious, Ted Kaczynski seemed to notice and actually react in a real way, instead of just kind of shutting up and going along with the system, or being like a kind of pretend radical critic of the system. And instead of going that Chomsky route, he goes in a very different direction. And like, even if, I think that the psychological trauma of these experiments, and we don't know also like what else they did, because a lot of the records are still sealed, right? Like, we've only gotten access to some of the tapes and the summaries.
Well, they reacted too, like, because this guy, I think, who you mentioned, Alston Chase, who like wrote the book Harvard and the Unabomber, he like was one of the first people to like bring the Murray experiment to light. I think he wrote about it in the Atlantic, which he talked to Kaczynski, and he first heard about the experiment from Kaczynski. But I think Kaczynski later, would kind of be, I think he later became like upset at the way, I think possibly because of what we were just talking about, like the perception that he was like MK'd and became crazy, whereas he doesn't want, he considers himself to not be crazy.
He seems to almost care more about that than kind of anything else, is that he is not labeled as just a nut. Like, he's very insistent that he's like of sound mind and he did what he did, and he has his ideas, and he wants to promote them, and he's not crazy. Like, it's very insistent. And when you listen to some of the tapes in these experiments, like, it's easy to see why. Because a lot of these conversations, these sort of in mock interrogations, were incredibly gaslighty and being like, well, no, I just think you're stupid. No, your philosophy is really kind of mushy, isn't it? You know, and it's like, well, no, it's not. You're just applying labels to me. You're just using labels, and it's like, you know, and it's like, is that why you're growing a beard, because you want to conform with the nonconformists? He's like, I'm not non-conforming with the nonconformists. It's not even much of a beard, and the guy's like, you're darn right, it's not. You know, it's like super. You're saying this like 18, 19-year-old kid. Like, they're so mean to him.
Yeah, they will like deliberately do like not attack therapy, but just like attack psychology type stuff. Like they would have a psychologist like advise on like what insults would be the most effective. You know, apparently
on purpose. And the study was like deceptive about that. It was saying that you were going to like, you have to write an essay about your personal philosophy, and then you come in and a like law student is going to engage you in a spirited debate about your ideas. But instead it was like a scary interrogation where they just start like attacking you like some kind of like BPD maniac, you know, and like trying to undermine you. Like they've studied you enough that they're just like totally like hitting at all your soft spots and shit, and trying to see like, oh, how far can we go? They're also like attached, like have like electrodes attached to them the whole time, like monitoring, you know, their heart rate and their, you know, brain patterns and shit. And there was a lot of like, really at the tail end of Ted Kaczynski's involvement in it, that's when the LSD experiments started. But that we can get into that later. Well, because that actually brings it around to like the really cool thing about the Net documentary that it does is it kind of starts off with a simple premise of this German documentarian kind of reading about the Unabomber case, and then reading the manifesto, and then looking at who he targeted. And noticing that some of the people were like these very highly esteemed computer scientists and people like that. I think another was a top geneticist, Epstein, and then Gelernter, right?
Yeah.
David Gelernter at Yale, who is a top computer scientist and very public kind of face.
Isolated.
So she goes to like some of these people to interview them and like about just their whatever stuff, you know, computers, technology, but then brings up the Unabomber. And like right at the beginning of the documentary, you get a sense that like something's up, because like the way these people react, and you can kind of understand from like somebody who got their hand blown off by the Unabomber that like they'd be like, fuck. But even the other people like John Brockman, big person, and Steward Brand, who we've mentioned before, like kind of the way John Brockman reacts is almost, I get such a sinister like sus vibe from it. I don't know. Did you? Because they're basically all like, they said the same thing, that he's a madman. He's a madman. He's crazy. And I'm not going to dignify like him with like talking about his so-called ideas. Like, let's move on. I don't want to talk about this. Like they get very, very hostile, right? Just because she doesn't even get to the point of saying, do you think the Unabomber had a point at all?
Yeah,
like,
she definitely doesn't say that at all. Like, she basically just very, like, delicately suggests that. Is it a woman documentarian? I thought it was a dude, but I guess it's just like...
The woman doing the interview... It's a woman doing the interview, so... I'm not sure either.
She definitely does... She just, like, kind of feels like, is there, like, some connection, like, between what, like, you're saying and what, like, the Unabomber... But they didn't really seem to engage with... like the, you know, any of his like ideas as substantive or having any relationship. Like, I don't know, like, I guess, maybe she was kind of entertaining the notion that like the possibility the Unabomber was like contained within the type of stuff that these people were discussing or advocating. Like, she isolates this like one essay about like the Digerati, you know, I guess probably is one of the first uses of that term in like Edge magazine, I guess.
Edge magazine, interesting.
And
this is very Josh Harris era, kind of when it was filmed too. This must have been filmed around like right after 9/11, like 2002 in New York. So it's still that very like we live in public area of like these confident schlubby nerds like talking about like the net and like how it's going to change everything. Anyways,
Yeah, basically, like they gave like a bunch of like quote unquote Digerati, these like cute names, like this is just from the end of the article before they in today's world, technological advances are taking place at a rate unparalleled at any other time in history. The very nature of change itself has evolved so quickly that a hallmark of the 20th century is the uncertainty with which we all live. The ideas and information included in this book are essential to anyone interested in knowing who we are and where we are headed. Our models and metaphors are in a state of flux. Our world and all the things that we know in it are being radically altered and transformed. Not like comforting if you're the Unabomber, but no. This is a book about a group of people who are reinventing culture and civilization. I present the Digerati. They present themselves. They are not on the frontier. They are the frontier. They are. And these are just like some of the, the pragmatist, Steward Alsop. The coyote, John Perry Barlow. The scout, Stewart Brand. The seer, David Bunnell. It goes on like the gadfly, John C. Dvorak. The software developer, Bill Gates. The conservative, of course, is David Gerlernter. Wow. The conservative. Yeah.
Really? That you mean like John Perry Barlow, who managed Dick Cheney's congressional campaign in the 1980s?
He's the coyote.
No, he hangs out with the Grateful Dead. So
yeah. Isn't a coyote like someone who like kidnaps people, like and traffics them?
Like a human trafficker?
Yeah.
Yes. That's not the last time human traffickers will come up in this milieu. What is it?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
But you could see this
John
very triggering.
Brockman is the one who wrote that. Like, by the way.
Wait, John Brockman wrote that article?
Yeah, or he wrote that like intro. Yeah.
Oh my God. So okay, yeah, John Brockman, who is like a kind of 60s culture maker who, by the time they were filming this documentary, he ran like a literary agency, right? And he became very successful publishing all kinds of like really almost like pop science kind of different authors and stuff, but like all of it with a very like techno-optimistic, like that kind of shit, like meet the Digerati, like and it makes sense because he was their literary agent, so he was like he basically collected this whole stable.
That was actually a book that was like, it was the intro was like published like elsewhere, but that is from a book that he, I guess, at least wrote the intro to, called Digerati, Encounters with the Cyber Elite. So that was like, yeah.
Yeah, so you could tell, like, for him, just like with Stewart Brand or John Perry Barlow and all these other people, like, technology is radical and badass. It's going to create a new Jeffersonian cyber utopia. It is the new frontier. They are declaring the independence of cyberspace, and, like, get with it, you squares, like, basically. And, I mean, that's basically just that list of people. Stewart Brand is interviewed in the net. John Perry Barlow is not, but he's thanked in the credits. So he must have, I don't know, provided some kind of assistance or something. And, like he pops up in like the Adam Curtis documentaries that kind of talk about this milieu, but I kind of like the direction that this documentary goes in kind of better. I mean, like, because the other thing about the first interviews is they start the interview asking like John Brockman about his background. And he explains this very like, it just gets harder and harder as we go through all of these 60s sus lords to just like buy their weird Johnny Appleseed origin stories, That was just like, I was playing like the fiddle he was like playing the banjo in a park one day in New York.
Yeah, I was just, busting a juggling or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I forget if he was in the military for a little while, which wouldn't have been that weird back then, or if like he'd started working on Wall Street. Like he's one of these guys that like bounced around. Like I think he had made some money on Wall Street, but for some reason he was just sitting in a park one day playing a banjo, and this other artist guy whose name I'm forgetting comes up and is like, "Whoa, man, like you're groovy, I dig your vibe." And he's like, and the next day, like I was appointed to like organize this like underground film festival in New York. And this became very closely associated with like the Andy Warhol like factory scene. And of course, like just like Del Close, like they were just all about doing like wild, like just crazy experimental shit. And it really looks very, very similar to what Ken Kesey was doing at the acid tests on the West Coast, like kind of around the same time. Like they were doing weird light shows and experimenting with music and just doing crazy effects and just having a freak out and all that stuff. And so eventually he becomes like a central player in this whole milieu, and he's like bragging about bringing together. He also mentions he had read like Norbert Wiener's Cybernetics, and so he was like obsessed with the intersection between art and like cybernetics and technical stuff. And so he became this person that combined all these different like influencers into a kind of nascent Digerati, and then really like hit his stride in like the 80s and the 90s with his Edge Foundation and edge.org, right?
Yeah.
Which we'll probably get to more later, but was funded by a gentleman, another gifted child named Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
And he's in a little bit of a limbo right now as of 2022 because all that shit started to come out just in the last few years. And so that's a whole nother like mind-blowing kind of angle to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is at the time that the net was being shot, and that's why like his vibe is so sinister in that scene. And like he even has a little bit of like Epstein energy, like his like there's something about like his smirk and stuff, and like his confidence and stuff. And like so he was like really tight with Jeffrey Epstein around. This is like during Epstein's kind of like peak sicko days of the early 2000s, where he was hobnobbing with like the maximum amount of celebrities. And according to one former, I think like friend / acolyte / client of Brockman's, who like kind of wrote a breakup article about him a couple years ago, like he sent him a very weird email one time that was talking about like going to Jeffrey Epstein's mansion and finding like Prince Andrew getting a foot massage from like a young like Belarusian girl, and basically saying like, you want to meet him, like you want to meet Epstein. And he's like, I don't know, man. But he's like, yeah, but you know, a guy who's like the CEO of Victoria's Secret and owns a modeling agency, like that's the kind of guy you want to meet. And he was like, nah, I'm like, I read about how he was like a pedophile. Like, I'm good, actually. And so like that was evidence that like, oh no, he not only, he mentioned in that email, like, yeah, he did a little bit of jail time like a year ago. There was some kind of thing. And anyways, like you should come meet him. So that they clearly all knew. And Bill Gates definitely knew, didn't he? You know, he was, it seems like his divorce was very Epstein related. And,
definitely played a role. It didn't help.
No, it didn't help. And
he
was bankrolling the Edge
Melinda
Foundation.
Gates was like, I had nightmares about Jeffrey Epstein. Like the moment I saw him, I knew he was pure evil. And
you just know that like they weren't just hanging out. Like there's no fucking way that they were just kicking it and like having dinners and talking about science or something. You know what I mean?
I mean, can you imagine like, you know, insisting on like hanging out with someone who like your wife turns to you and says like he's pure evil and he haunts my dreams? Like what the fuck? Like, I mean, just that would even happen. Like, you know, why do you have a friend who like haunts your wife's dreams and like who she perceives as being pure evil? Like, not to say that Melinda Gates is like, you know, I mean, I feel like she's like a little bit of evil too. So like the fact that she was like so disturbed.
That's the thing. She went along with a lot of the weird like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation stuff. But then like for something to be too much, I mean, it had to be probably pretty bad. And
apparently his aura was just like that oppressive.
Interesting. Okay. She's a spiritualist too. They're all doing ayahuasca together.
Yeah, maybe she was attuned to it on a spiritual. I just meant like, you know, figuratively speaking. Like
but you know, we also know a little more now about like Jeffrey Epstein's obsession with transhumanism and living forever and being like cryogenically frozen and like genetically creating like an army of like clone babies that are just like you and all that kind of shit.
Brockman basically like facilitated all of that. Like that he was the one who like made it possible for him to like meet all these people, you know, and like schmooze with all of them and like be kind of like operating as like almost like an agent, pun intended, like almost like your lit agent of like, let me introduce you to my pal Jeffrey, he's fantastic and stuff, and was getting a bunch of money from him, and then it kind of stopped abruptly in 2015. Like Epstein stopped, and then they stopped hosting like, I don't know if it was a billionaire conference, but it was like leadership summits, which I guess were always like these weird boozy kind of events that some people have written about as like being just like full of lecherous old men, like many of whom have just gotten sort of like canceled in the last few years. John Searle was one who
like at a conference asked a really weird question about like whether like women shaving their pubic hair was like leading to psychological changes in the population, to like a woman speaker. And everyone was like, what? And then he got Me Too'd and was like revealed that he used to like just watch porn like all day, like in his office on his computer and like sexually harasses assistants and all that kind of shit. So like we can really see there's like some creepy sicko kind of vibes like in this broader milieu. There's also a almost messianic faith in like the good vibes of technological progress, almost to the point where they're bragging about it. And like you said, like you could just imagine Ted Kaczynski like sitting in his cabin reading this like Digerati book or something and just like seething with like, I have to do something. Like I have to go after these people because, you know, they're on the exact opposite of the spectrum of him in terms of being relentlessly positive about, even despite being huge sickos in so many ways. And so who's really
Brockman
mentally ill? Like, I don't know.
Didn't John Brockman say like, well, you know, this, I think like the documentarian asked like, you know, why the Unabomber targeted who he targeted or whatever. And he was like, well, this madman, this criminal, he read the New York Times, and people in the New York Times were associated with technology or something like that. Like, right? Wasn't that like?
Yeah, he did say that.
Yeah, he was like, he read the New York Times.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.